only guest. And, of course, there's only one question. Are you going to run again? And are you back in the race? And he kept saying, well, I'm just going to leave that up to my 50-state chairman. And I kept saying, but Mr. Perot, your 50-state chairmen aren't there except to get you in the race. And so he just kept sort of fussing at me, and I thought, oh my Lord, what am I going to do? This man is getting so irritated that he's going to walk out. And then what am I going to do? He's my only guest. We're live on the air.
That's Cokie Roberts, who gives me, Marky Billson, host of Tri-City Sports Now here on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, a lot of strength for obvious reasons. However, what are we talking about? Ross Perot, presidential candidate 92, also 96, Reform Party. He passed away yesterday, computer magnate, age of 89. Jim Ryan on the obituary. I think we all know who Ross Perot is, but yeah, there is a reason why I'm talking about this, and we'll get to it right after Jim Ryan tells us the obituary.
He was a self-made billionaire, a pioneer in the computer services industry, and twice an independent candidate for president. H. Ross Perot was diagnosed with leukemia in February, and his family says that a massive secondary infection the next month nearly killed him. But he fought the illness and continued to clock in at his office every morning. Last month, he celebrated his 89th birthday. Now the family confirms that Ross Perot has died. Jim Ryan, ABC News, Dallas.
Why am I talking about Ross Perot on a sports talk show? Well, I mean, I am not one that shies away from the political nature of sports on this show, as everyone knows. Got some sound bites from Megan Rapinoe. I mean, is it Rapinoe? That I could go to if I need to in this final segment. Well, I started as a sports talk show in 1996. And I'm convinced, at this station as a matter of fact. The first run of the show went till 97, and then it was revived under the name of Tri-City Sports. Now, they had a different name back in the 90s, and it was a stupid name, okay? I mean, I'm not going to tell you what it was, but just I was not big on it. But now it's Tri-City Sports Now. All right, so if you'd like to change it, just sponsor us, and I'll be rich, and you'll be profitable. What we're going to do is we're going to talk, though, a little bit about Ross Perot. And I think that I was 4 years too late to become a sports talk show host. I really was. In 1992, I actually was calling up a lot of sports talk radio stations, especially around here. And I still think that I have the most famous sports talk call from 1992 in the history of local sports talk radio. Of course, I don't do interviews. I don't take calls here because I think that callers around here, I really don't think anybody wants to know what Lemmy from the Bronx has to say. And I don't want them hijacking my show. I've got all this material that I, can't get to today, and I wanted to, but, that's the way it goes sometimes. I can bring it back for tomorrow and all this. But in 1992, when Ross Perot was running for president, at the same time, there was a coup going on with the Tennessee Volunteers. John Majors had left the Vols with a 2-0 record, I believe it was, with an undefeated record. And you have to understand, the Vols at that time were not necessarily considered, well, not as bad as it is now, but they weren't thought of as a perennial SEC contender. They were 89, they tied, but Alabama they went to the Sugar Bowl. They were recognized as the SEC champ, even if it was a three-way tie. 85, Tennessee goes to the Sugar Bowl, yes. But, you know what? They only went because Florida was on probation. 9-1-2, finishing the top 5, great team. But if Florida hadn't cheated, or if they hadn't been caught, I should say, then they go to Nollins. Vols did play Virginia in what some billed as the Battle of Bristol back then, although I defy you to find any Wahoos fan in Bristol, Virginia. It's all pretty much Hokies if they're not rooting for the Vols. And you get to Abingdon. That's where it starts to be Hokies territory, really. I mean, it's about 50-50 in Bristol. And you go to, anyway, in 92, they were coming off of that Sugar Bowl season, but, you know, victory against Notre Dame that nobody really saw coming. But they still were, you know, on the verge. This wasn't the 90s when the Vols were losing like one game a year, winning the national championship or something. That wasn't necessarily, you know, thought of as what the Tennessee Volunteers program was at that time. But then Majors undergoes heart surgery in season, and then Phil Fulmer takes over. He wins 3 games in a row. The Vols are 5-0, and I believe they were ranked number 4 in the country at the time. They were in the top 5. And that really hadn't been done that early. People were talking about the national title. Really, it had been years. I mean, you know, Tennessee national championship, that really hadn't been talked about for generations. They hadn't won it since 51, and even then, that was when the title was given before the bowl game, so they lost by 2 touchdowns to, actually 15 points. I don't think the 2-point conversion was around in 51, to Maryland in a Sugar Bowl. So, you know, were they really the best team? That was, you know. Anyway, so Fulmer takes over at 5-0, and then Majors comes back, and Majors insists, and I believe him, that there was a contract on his desk right before he went in for heart surgery. But then what happened, an extension, and he told everybody about it, but when Fulmer won those 3 games, and then Majors came back, and, well, then they lost to Arkansas at a losing record on a last-second field goal. They lost to Alabama, won a national title, but they still lost to him, Heath Schuler, by a touchdown. And then lost to a bad South Carolina team in Columbia by a point when a 2-point conversion didn't go in. Steve Tannehill was a quarterback freshman year. We had Tannehill on to talk about that game because I said how much it mirrored the 2016 situation, and sure enough, yep, okay, that's exactly what happened in 2016, so it was deja vu 24 years later with Jake Bentley doing the Steve Tannehill role. And so what happened is there was something, you know, you talk to one person, he says one thing, you talk to another, he says, there was, Phil Fulmer did make 26 calls to a booster to try to get the Tennessee head coaching job. And, well, end of the year, Tennessee's 8-3. They're not going to the Sugar Bowl. And fans kind of want the younger, hipper Phil Fulmer, and John Majors is shoved out the door. Greatest living figure in the history of the program, he's shoved out the door. Okay. That's what happened. So there's this big controversy on who should be the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers at the time. And also at the time, Ross Perot was running for president. And he was crediting his success to the Volunteers. No, not Tennessee, his own. But whenever you would talk to him, it would be, you know, the Volunteer. I used to be able to do Ross Perot. Now, Larry, the Volunteers. And I thought, who better to be a compromised head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers than Ross Perot? I had this whole, you know, bit pulled out and all this sort of thing, you know. And it was that he was going to come in. Now, Larry, what we're going to do here is we're going to have an electronic system. We want to hear from you. I'm all ears. And what we're going to do is every play before, we're going to have the fans vote on it on my electronic system here. All right? Run or pass. Punt or go for it. It'll be up to the fans. We'll compute it up immediately, and this is how we will call plays. Now, what play we're going to run? Got to leave that to me. All right? I'm the boss. But we will hear from you. We want to hear from you. I'm all ears. The Volunteers. We will lead this team back to prominence. I wanted to do that bit so bad, but I didn't have a show. 27 years now after the fact, I am now able to do Ross Perot as the Tennessee Volunteers coach. I am ecstatic. All right. That's what we were going to do. What hole we went through? If it's 3rd and 1, you want to run the ball? That's up to me. Quarterback sneak, give it to the fullback, give it to the tailback on the pitch. I got to make that decision. But we will hear from you. I will do your play. Want to throw the ball? Want to catch them by surprise? We'll do it. It was my idea for Ross Perot coaching the Volunteers. Anyway, you may have had to have been around back then to understand that fully. One person who won't be around any longer, unfortunately, is Greg Johnson, former Nashville Predators center and captain, who passed away at my age, 48. Died on Tuesday, according to the Chronicle-Journal in Thunder Bay. This really gets you to understand your mortality when someone your age passes away like this, who was a mighty athlete. Johnson came to the NHL before the Predators were around in '93. He was drafted by the Flyers, actually, back in '89. Traded to the Red Wings, 4 years with Detroit, also played with the Penguins and the Blackhawks, was selected in the expansion draft. He was an original Predator, and in '98 spent his last 7 years of his career, retired in 2006 with 145 goals and 369 points in 785 games. By the way, University of North Dakota, all-time leading scorer, 272 points in 4 seasons at North Dakota, which is, of course, a hockey powerhouse. So, wanted to mention that. That came about yesterday and all that. I also mentioned, as we go to grab bag, and I'm not going to have time to get to some of these stories that I do want to get to, but tomorrow I'm going to talk to Rick Goslin, who votes on the Hall of Fame, Dallas sports writer, and he is the head of the senior committee. I'll try to get to more about baseball tomorrow as well, what Bud Selig had to say, etc. So what Rob Manfred had to say about the state of baseball, juicing the ball, and all of that. So we'll get to that tomorrow as well. We do also want to thank Chris Doherty for coming on Martinsville Bulletin, telling us a little bit about the Appalachian League and the hitting philosophies of the Danville Braves, who will be hosting the Greenville Reds and are leading the Western Division of the Appalachian League. They're doing it old school, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Braves, even in Atlanta now, are winning instead of the new school, everybody's got to be Dave Kingman philosophy of hitting. One guy who didn't subscribe to that theory of hitting was the manager, Roger Craig. For one thing, he was a pitcher. But today is the 59th birthday of Roger Craig, the running back of the San Francisco 49ers. And I always thought this was kind of neat, because at the time in San Francisco, this is the Joe Montana era, but they were winning Super Bowls with Roger Craig as a running back. And then, starting in 1986, Craig was already established as running back with the 49ers then, Roger Craig, the pitcher, was the Giants, San Francisco Giants manager. And in just 2 years, he took the Giants, and Will Clark, and the aforementioned Rick Russell that I spoke of, and some other players, Jeffrey Leonard and all this. He took them from last place in 100 losses in 1985 to, by 1987, the division title and the pennant in 89. And I always thought, just how 2 guys named Roger Craig, so prominent in San Francisco sports. It reminded me of, at the time, both in St. Louis, the baseball and the football team was called the Cardinals. You had this universal name. Where does this relate to for us? Guys, I started thinking about this. Where else but the Tri-Cities do we think of Steve Forbes as a basketball coach and not someone trying to